That'll likely count. Those are both the Mayo things for us to look at. All right. Yeah, that's much better. It's not a great picture, but tell us about it.
It's not. And I have you know that on Keithan's computer, we can see it a little bit better than this one because it's very washed out in this one. So you can see a little more detail, like the people, you can see a little bit better in that one. But, so the first thing that we noticed was, this is obviously a broadcasting, okay? They have, on the air, no admittance. There's a time up here that you can't see, it's like 8:45 to 9:15, right? But what we noticed, or first, is that just the studio dates itself right there. In a typical studio for broadcasting, you're not going to have wood floors, which we have down here. You can't really see it in this photo, but the roof kind of goes up, so it angles up. Also, it's not closed off, which, and all those together, that equals very bad acoustics for your recording. Then, kind of what we were wondering is, are these the two broadcasters, or is one a guest? Maybe they're doing an interview or something like that. We obviously don't know who they are.
And what would they be talking about from the 50 minutes?
Yeah.
That's a good question. What's the subject?
Honestly,
They weren't taking callers.
well, back in 1947, you also have to remember, since television were extremely expensive back then. Just a standard, you don't have a standard like one standard television, one home, that's about the size of a bread box. It's going to be cost like maybe $20 back then.
Very little programming too.
Especially during the academic times, especially times during the Cold War, where information was always being sent out from, especially on an academic campus. I'd say that radio was probably their main source of information about things that could be going on for the day. They could be talking about things like they're going to be having for lunch in the cafeteria, until some of the main events happened in the Cold War, happened around 1947.
Type of stuff.
There you go.
They were talking about sports. They were talking about how Jackie Robinson went off towards Brooklyn Dodgers around that time, or they could talk how Tom and Jerry went to the theaters back at that time too. So that was the first time they actually got back in theaters in 1947.
And I can't remember, it was my impression, and I can't remember if we read this or not, but this is a broadcasting that took place on campus.
I imagine so.
Yeah. And so then that leads to, okay, was this broadcasted locally, or was it just the campus that got it? And if it was just the campus, that's kind of a weird time frame, so the class times might have been a little different. And that in and of itself, if you're looking for people, like now radio's kind of taking commuters, into consideration when doing their programming. So a lot of the important stuff typically doesn't start after 9 o'clock, because that's usually when the typical workday starts. So that was something to kind of consider, was what was the daily life like, and the time frame of each day, and what was that like during that time period. What else did we have?
Honestly, you haven't that's sort of a bridge or time frame. Like radio stations nowadays actually play different types of music. You can honestly wonder if they didn't have a guest or someone on to talk, but what kind of music could they honestly play? You honestly, if you take it back at the time. I mean, we're in Texas, so most likely could have been country, but honestly, you never know honestly what type. It could have been popular artists that could have been played, and just general records. That you do see a record player that's really right in the back that a student is operating.
Yeah. So there may not be elevators on campus at that point, so I don't know. One story building.
The other question that we ran into was this particular photo was taken place in 1947. You notice that there's no women in the photos, only male. So we were kind of wondering a little bit about that. I know that there was a lot of feminist groups and things like that.
Well, in a different time, maybe not now.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. And of course, we don't know what they're talking about.
Yeah.
So if this was a campus-based broadcast, then we would only assume that the campus archives would have something like this available to us. Maybe past broadcast recordings and things like that.
Yes. In which case, that would be a very cool multimedia project But we can also, so we got research questions we could ask, you know, a project could answer what show might have been going on at this time, who might have been listening to it, how far did it broadcast, who were these people likely to be, did they do guest stars?
From the way that honestly the photo looks, it actually will seem to be a photo, honestly, that could be placed off towards one of the yearbooks that were currently back then, which in the captions you probably can honestly find the identities, or at least within the further in the yearbook, you can actually find either the identity, either the broadcaster, or even maybe the guest that honestly is being interviewed within the broadcast.
The one other question I had was, is this a broadcasting program? And I mean like a school academic program, like you have English and education and stuff. Was broadcasting something that you could go into?
Yes.
Or was it just something you did?
Yes, very good, very good. And is that a chalkboard to the right there?
You know, we were trying to figure that out. It looks like a chalkboard, but I'm trying to figure out if it could have been used as some kind of sound barrier to help
Which makes no sense because there's an open hallway right here.
Yeah.
So
Condense the sound.
that's what we weren't sure if it was, you know, because you can't tell if it's clock or, because it doesn't, I mean, you would assume, granted you have to look at what chalkboards look like during that time period, but it doesn't really look like it's structured like one.
I'd say that actually does look more like sound, because it doesn't seem to look more like a chalkboard. At one point I honestly thought that it looked similar to the wall, the way that actually in Lebanon I actually could see that it actually seems a little bit darker than the wall.
Yeah, so I mean, that would be an interesting thing to look at too. I mean, what kinds of technologies were involved in these early radio programs, and maybe they just weren't aware of them, or maybe they were just making do with what they had. I mean, I could certainly see using, egg crates on the wall to set up a studio these days. It looks like it's a wood frame house too, or something.
Yeah, that was the other question, what building was it?
All right, thank you, folks. Wonderful. And I would love it if we had some of those early